In the case surrounding the death of the iconic Gene Hackman, a crucial piece of evidence revealed surprising twists: his final call. What initially appeared to be a moment of panic, this brief conversation held key details that assisted investigators in uncovering the truth behind Hackman's tragic passing. Join us as we dive into this investigation, exploring how a short phone call helped unravel the mystery and reveal the true cause of this legend's untimely departure. If you're eager to discover the untold details of the case, be sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Share your thoughts in the comments and join us as we unravel the truth together. When silence becomes suffocating. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's home had never been one filled with loud noise. In his later years, Hackman embraced the solitude of Santa Fe, where sunlight gently streamed through aged window panes, and the house was steeped in the scent of weathered wood, a quiet, timeless presence that clung to every corner. Yet since that fateful day, the silence that once offered peace now felt heavier, laden with fear. It was no longer the tranquil harmony it had been, but a stifling quiet, as if every breeze was blocked, keeping something unspeakable hidden, a truth too haunting to be revealed. On that day, the first to shatter the silence wasn't Gene Hackman, nor Betsy Arakawa, nor a neighbor or friend. It was a plumber, a stranger who had come to perform a simple task. He was the first to notice something amiss. He wasn't a police officer, certainly not a psychic, but the chill that ran down his spine when his hand brushed against the slightly ajar front door would stay with him for the rest of his life. The heavy walnut door, always kept securely shut, was a rule Hackman never broke. A man who valued control and the certainty of doors that were always locked. Yet, on that day, the door stood ajar, as though someone had left in haste or abandoned an unfinished journey. There were no signs of forced entry, no odd marks on the floor, no shattered glass, but the unsettling stillness within the house made the plumber pause. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, his instinct telling him something was terribly wrong. The first call didn't come from Gene, nor from Betsy, but from a stranger. His voice quivered as he spoke to the dispatcher, unsure whether it was fear or some indescribable feeling creeping up his spine. The scent of damp wood lingered in the air, mixing with the unmistakable smell of cold, untouched food. Meals left half-eaten, as though they had been set down in haste. Shaky hands had placed the food on the table, but they never returned to finish what was started. Outside, the water bowls for the three dogs, Bear, Nikita, and Xena, remained full, yet their familiar shapes were nowhere to be seen. Gene Hackman was known for his meticulous caution. He never left a door open, not even a tiny crack. The door slightly ajar that day felt like an unspoken message, a subtle reminder left by someone to signal that behind it, everything had slipped beyond control. All the outdoor security cameras were functioning perfectly, yet curiously, the video footage from 36 hours before the 911 call was made showed nothing, an eerie blankness, as if time itself had been erased. There were no images, no sounds, no data, almost as if everything that transpired that fateful night had been wiped clean by an unseen force. The maintenance worker didn't dare step inside. He lingered at the threshold, his eyes drawn down the dark hallway stretching into the heart of the house, where a faint light from the back window illuminated small dog prints on the tile floor. These prints were scattered, as though Bear, Nikita, and Xena had raced around the house, chasing something or someone that was impossible to define. Time in the house seemed to freeze, yet an overwhelming sense of desperate urgency hung in the air, like a silent, breathless note in the sorrowful symphony of fate. As the worker turned to leave, he felt himself shivering, not from the late winter chill, but from a powerful instinct that told him he had unknowingly opened the final door to the secret Gene Hackman had kept hidden in the last days of his life. The slightly ajar door didn't merely lead into the house. It opened into the quiet hell that had consumed the final moments of a legend's life. The worker's fearful whisper lingered in the air. Santa Fe, a quiet afternoon, with the sun casting long beams of light down the gravel road leading to Gene Hackman's home. No one could have predicted that beneath this serene calm lay a nightmare brewing silently behind the wooden door. The plumber, thinking he was simply stopping to address a minor issue, had unknowingly become the first witness to a tragedy even the most daring scripts would never dare to imagine. Gripping his cold wrench, the middle-aged man circled the house, searching for any sign of life. After a brief pause at the threshold, he found himself unable to step inside. Something was terribly wrong. Too quiet, too unnerving, as if a heavy presence clung to every corner, every shadow. The instincts of an ordinary worker couldn't quite place the feeling, but the rapid rise and fall of his chest, along with the thundering pulse in his ears, spoke volumes. He moved toward the back of the house, passing the large window that opened into the living room where Gene Hackman often sat, lost in a book beneath the soft glow of warm light. What he saw next took his breath away. Betsy Arakawa, the petite woman with the gentle smile, lay motionless, her eyes wide open but unseeing, a tragic, lifeless figure in the coziest room of Santa Fe, as if frozen in time, no longer part of the world around her. Damn it! Damn it! Oh, damn it! The man's voice cracked with each breath, his panic rising. He stepped back, hands shaking as he fumbled for his phone in his coat pocket. His fingers were cold, not from the wind, but from the raw, primal fear gripping his nerves. Fear only those who have glimpsed the edge of death can truly understand. The 911 call reverberated through the vast emptiness of the American West. His words fragmented, stuttered, a chaotic string of sounds as his mind teetered on the brink. The dispatcher on the other end had heard countless emergency calls, but the way that voice fluctuated between terror and hopelessness sent a cold shiver down her spine. I saw someone in Hackman's house. Oh, damn it, she was just lying there. Oh, damn it. The fragments of his story collided, tangled with heavy breaths and the sound of footsteps retreating from the window, as if the man feared that by standing too close, a cold, unseen hand would reach out and pull him into the darkness with Gene and Betsy. When the Santa Fe police received the report, they never imagined that one of the most chilling cases in the town's history would begin from the very home of Hollywood icon Gene Hackman. This town was too small for such tragedies. The locals were accustomed to land disputes, stolen trucks, or the occasional drunken brawl. No one was prepared for the scene investigators would discover when they stepped through the slightly ajar wooden door. Betsy lay on the carpet, her arm limp, her eyes wide open, but there was no expression of sheer terror on her face. That only deepened the mystery. She hadn't fought, hadn't struggled. There were no signs of a struggle. She simply lay there, as though she had resigned herself to something she had known, something she had foreseen, something that had caused the once strong woman to forego any attempt to escape. Outside the window, the maintenance worker stood frozen, his gaze locked on the body through the glass. It was as if Betsy's eyes were still following him across the cold pane, straddling the divide between life and death. By the time the police arrived, the house had been sealed off, but the true enigma, the most chilling part, wasn't in the living room where Betsy lay. It was what awaited behind the closed door at the end of the hallway. Gene Hackman's office, where his final call had been made, where the real story was only just beginning to unfold. What did Gene Hackman say? The old phone was discovered beside his body, lying askew in the corner of the cold mudroom, as though it too had witnessed the final moments of the man who once stood at the peak of Hollywood. A thin layer of dust covered the screen, but a finger had wiped it away, revealing hurried activity, unsent messages, missed calls, and amidst the disarray, one call stood out. Gene Hackman's final call. A leaked source from an anonymous investigator revealed that Gene Hackman made a call before collapsing, not a casual call, nor a lengthy conversation. It was incredibly brief, lasting only a few seconds, but every word spoken into the phone Gene held became an obsession, even for the most experienced investigators. "I can't breathe. Something's wrong with Betsy." A simple sentence, yet laden with meaning. According to sources, Gene's voice had become hoarse, his breaths ragged, as though each word was a struggle against the pain tightening around his chest. The investigator replayed the recording from the switchboard over and over, dissecting each breath, every long pause between his words. In Gene's voice, there was an unmistakable undercurrent of fear, a fear only those who have witnessed war or survived near-death experiences can truly comprehend. Gene Hackman, who had spent decades working on film sets alongside legendary names and playing commanding roles, unflinching in the face of both heaven and hell, found his voice trembling like a child in his final moments. Was it because he sensed that this time everything had changed? Why did Gene mention Betsy in that call? Investigators believe this is the key clue. He didn't call to report danger to himself. Instead, he spoke of Betsy, the woman who had stood by his side for so many years. This suggests that in his final moments, Gene wasn't focused on his own safety. He was worried about her. He knew something was wrong with Betsy, even before the crisis began to unfold around him. A peculiar detail emerged from the sound analysis. Interspersed between Gene's fragmented words was the distant sound of a dog barking, possibly coming from the bathroom where Betsy was later found. This reinforced the theory that Gene had sensed something was terribly wrong with his wife, perhaps a sign of a health crisis or some other unforeseen event unfolding before him. And then, as he attempted to call for help, he too fell into a state of peril, unable to escape the danger that seemed to close in on them both. Investigators began to seriously consider whether the call had been interrupted by a medical issue, such as a sudden heart attack or an acute symptom, or if some external interference had played a role. But from every angle, This final call wasn't merely a desperate plea from a husband concerned for his wife, it could also be a final testament, the last crucial piece needed to uncover the truth about what really transpired in that cold, $3.8 million mansion. Another source from the telecommunications center uncovered a chilling detail. Just before the line cut off, there was a long, drawn-out breath, its origin unclear, whether it was Gene or someone else in the house. It wasn't the breath of someone gasping for air, but rather the exhale of someone taking their final breath, an unmistakable sound, one that haunted every investigator who heard it. What terrified everyone wasn't just what Gene said, but what he never had the chance to say. Something had transpired between Gene and Betsy, something only they truly understood. And when the final call was made, it wasn't just the fading voice of a Hollywood legend, it was the echo of a hidden secret, a secret that may never be uncovered. Outside the house where the two bodies were found, the sun of Santa Fe stretched on, indifferent as ever. But for those who knew about Gene Hackman's last call, that sunlight was merely a thin veil, masking the storm of truth that was about to tear everything apart. If you find the story of Gene Hackman's death intriguing and captivating, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with the number 0. Now let's dive into the next developments of the story. The white, yellow, and blue pills were scattered across the table, spilling onto the floor like pieces of a perplexing puzzle. Amidst the mess, a single open bottle lay on its side, the label still clearly legible, showing the doctor's name, the patient's name, and small dosage warnings. The investigators lingered in the room, their eyes carefully scanning every word, every mark on the bottle's surface, searching desperately for any clue that might answer the most chilling question of all. What truly happened to Gene and Betsy Hackman? There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of forced entry, and no screams or crashes heard from neighbors in the 24 hours leading up to the discovery of the two bodies. Most strikingly, there were no external wounds on either of the couple. Investigators found themselves drawn back to the scattered pills on the table. They weren't just physical evidence, they were fragments of the inner turmoil of an elderly couple who had spent nearly 3 decades together, weathering moments of glory, storms, and hidden currents that no one else had ever witnessed. Gene Hackman, who had stood at the height of the film industry, appearing before millions with a tough, impenetrable exterior, had actually struggled with a weak heart for many years. His heart condition was no secret to those closest to him. There were treatments, prescriptions, regular checkups, and mornings when he sat quietly on the porch, softly stroking his wedding ring as if seeking some final piece of peace. All of this was documented in the medical records collected by the police. However, there was one thing missing from those records: Betsy's psychological instability. The woman who always smiled in photos beside her husband had been silently battling unexpected bouts of depression. Close friends recalled that Betsy would often sit for hours by the window, her eyes fixed on the world outside, occasionally breaking into tears for reasons no one could understand. After Gene announced his retirement, the bright lights of fame faded, and their sprawling home in Santa Fe became a sealed sanctuary where two aging souls found themselves trapped in long, suffocating days. The investigators meticulously examined each pill, some antidepressants listed in Betsy's medical records, some heart medications prescribed for Gene. But amid them were strange, unlabeled pills of unknown origin. Who brought them into the house? Who opened that final bottle? At the first meeting of the investigation team, the possibility of a drug overdose was put on the table. But something didn't quite add up. Older, reclusive couples with limited social interaction rarely fall victim to the tragic fate of overdosing like young Hollywood stars. Was it a case of sophisticated poisoning? A medication mix-up brought on by memory loss? Or could it have been Gene, in a moment of desperation, who opened that final bottle himself? The biggest question still lingered in the air of the Santa Fe police meeting room. Gene and Betsy. Who took the first pill? And as that pill slipped down their throats, what did it carry with it? A meticulously planned act, carefully orchestrated in advance, or merely a tragic mistake of fate? As the forensic team meticulously gathered the remaining pills, the fading sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow onto the corner of the table where an open bottle of medication sat, still and silent, like a mute witness. In that dim light, it almost felt as though two faint shadows lingered. Gene Hackman and Betsy, hand in hand, silently observing the investigation unfold, unraveling the secrets of their final moments. The dark wooden door, thick with the dust of time, creaked open to reveal a narrow, suffocating gap. The dim light of the late afternoon filtered through the crack, casting a faint streak across the cold tile floor. That was the first glimpse the investigators had of Gene and Betsy Hackman's home on that fateful afternoon. No doors were locked, no chains, no barriers stood between the outside world and the two lifeless bodies within. For anyone who had ever known Gene Hackman, this was completely out of character. At any age, Gene had always been obsessed with security. During his years under the Hollywood spotlight, he received countless threatening letters from obsessive fans and had to face photographers willing to do anything to invade the private lives of famous stars. Even after stepping away from the limelight and moving to Santa Fe, Gene continued the nightly ritual of checking the doors. His friends used to joke that he locked the doors so carefully that even Betsy, if she spent too long picking flowers in the garden, would have to knock several times to get back into the house. Yet, on that day, the front door was unlocked. The door leading to the backyard was only slightly ajar, revealing a patch of withered grass blown by the wind. There were no signs of a break-in, no strange mud stains, no suspicious footprints. Everything was eerily silent. The only thing left were the doors open, almost as if someone had hurriedly left or intentionally left behind a wordless message. Betsy Hackman, according to neighbors, had an intense fear of strangers. She rarely opened the door to anyone who hadn't called ahead, and even delivery workers were instructed to leave packages outside the gate. Because of this, when news of the unlocked doors surfaced, local media quickly raised suspicions. Could there have been a third party in the house that day? Someone familiar enough that Gene and Betsy didn't feel the need to be cautious, yet also someone who may have witnessed or become involved in the final tragedy. There were no signs of a struggle, no personal items out of place, and every corner of the house remained as neat as if the couple had just finished lunch and suddenly disappeared from this world. This quickly ruled out the hypothesis of a break-in or violent attack. But what could be more terrifying than violence itself? It was the silent presence of someone who knew the house intimately, who understood Gene and Betsy, who was familiar with their every little habit, a person who didn't need to break down the door or search for anything, because their very presence held the answer. The investigation team reviewed the security camera footage from the area. Santa Fe wasn't equipped with a vast number of surveillance cameras, but in this quiet neighborhood, most nearby households had basic recording devices installed. The data from the 24 hours leading up to the discovery of the bodies was collected and carefully analyzed, with each frame slowed down for closer inspection. The result? No suspicious individuals were recorded entering or leaving Gene and Betsy's home, no unfamiliar vehicles, and no unusual sounds to suggest any outside interference. This led to an even more chilling hypothesis. Was someone inside the house, staying for an extended period before quietly slipping away without leaving a trace? Or was there an unseen hand at work, erasing all evidence and rendering the camera system blind at the most critical moment? Amid the whirlwind of speculation, one question lingered in the minds of every investigator. If Gene and Betsy weren't the last to lock the door, then who opened it? And why? Why, in a house that had been securely locked for years, was the door left ajar that day, as if waiting for someone to return? As the last light of day faded across the threshold, it felt as though the door didn't merely open to the outside world, but to a dark secret, where truth and lies, life and death, intertwined in a labyrinth with no way out. The small, cramped room, barely large enough for an old wooden shelf, on which sat a few pairs of sneakers and worn rubber boots, still stained with dried mud from the backyard. This was Mudro, a space Gene Hackman had rarely spent time in during his life, yet it became the place where he collapsed, his body twisted into an unnatural position, his frail hand still clutching the phone, a silent witness to the unsaid words of his final moments. Why was Gene there? What could have driven a 94-year-old man, once a star who graced the most glamorous red carpets, to fall in such a confined space used only for storing shoes and umbrellas? The crime scene investigators spent hours meticulously examining every minute detail. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no evidence of a desperate fight for survival, just a haunting silence, as if Gene had entered Mudro carrying an unseen fear, only to collapse right at the threshold, his body crumpling in an eerie stillness. The first hypothesis suggested that Gene may have tried to rush out the front door to seek help, but the door was found ajar, not locked. This was in stark contrast to Gene's survival instincts, as he was always meticulous about locking the doors at night. If he truly intended to call for help from outside, why didn't he head for the garden, just a few steps from the main road? Why then did he stop in Mudro, the only room without windows and no way to see beyond its walls? The second hypothesis was even more chilling. Gene hadn't been trying to escape outside. He was running from something within his own home, something he had either heard or witnessed just before collapsing. The forensic team meticulously searched every corner of Mudro, every pair of shoes, every trace of mud, but found nothing out of the ordinary. However, as they continued to examine the phone in Gene's hand, the door to the true secret slowly began to creak open. The phone wasn't just a tool for communication, it was a silent witness to Gene Hackman's final moments. The phone still had battery, but the lock screen wouldn't unlock. The investigators used specialized techniques to back up all the data, searching for recent calls, unsent messages, even audio recording apps or personal logs. Then they discovered a short audio file, a recording that lasted less than 11 seconds, but it was enough to send chills down the spine of even the most seasoned investigators. The recording began with heavy, labored breaths, broken and strained, as if Gene was struggling to swallow the fear rising in his chest. His voice quivered, fragmented, but one sentence cut through the chaos. "Something's wrong with Betsy. I can't breathe." Immediately after those words, there was no loud crash, no objects falling, no screams or signs of a struggle, only a silence that stretched on for 3 agonizing seconds, followed by a soft click, the sound of a finger tapping the phone screen. The location data from the phone also revealed something puzzling. Just minutes before the recording was made, Gene's location shifted from the living room into Mudro, with no indication that he went upstairs or ventured into the garden. It was as if the entire house had trapped him in a loop, leaving him unable to escape. The investigation team quickly expanded their search to include Betsy's phone, hoping to find any signs of communication between the couple in those final moments. However, Betsy's phone had mysteriously shut off the night before. No calls, no messages, no open apps, almost as though someone had intentionally wiped every trace from her device. Why had Gene Hackman held the phone, recording a brief, panicked clip before collapsing in Mudro, a place where no one in the house had ever spent much time? What had he heard? What had he seen? Or had his own hand inadvertently uncovered a truth that had been hidden all along? Outside Mudro, the front door remained slightly ajar. The cold breeze of the late afternoon seeped through the crack, like the breath of an unseen stranger silently witnessing the final moments of Gene Hackman's life, but never revealing itself. As night fell over Santa Fe, the phone rang in the wooden house, shattering the stillness. On the other end, Gene Hackman's voice trembled. No longer the strong, resonant tone of a legend, but the faint whisper of a man nearing his end. "Betsy, I'm sorry, I can't..." A choked sob, followed by silence. The call ended, but those words lingered in the air like a long-delayed confession, an explanation that would never be completed. In the enigmatic case surrounding Gene Hackman's death, an unexpected piece of evidence emerged: the final call he made. What initially appeared to be a moment of panic and urgency turned out to be a vital clue, playing a key role in uncovering the chilling truth behind his passing. In this video, we'll delve into the investigation and explore how that brief 11-second call ultimately helped investigators uncover the real cause of his death. If you're intrigued by this case full of surprises and hidden twists, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next captivating investigation. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the fascinating stories ahead. See you in the next video.